Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is your host, Kyle Buller. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. If you're a longtime listener and supporter, welcome back, and thank you for being with us. Today on the show, I am joined by Christopher Solomon to chat about a plant medicine that doesn't seem to get too much press in the psychedelic world, and that is Salvia divinorum. So this is a really fun episode, and really enjoyed chatting with Christopher about Salvia to learn more about it. And it was kind of fun to almost do some debriefing because I think it was like a week or so before chatting with Christopher, I had my own experience with Salvia orally with a tincture. And so, I get to debrief my experience a little bit with him and just kind of go through that process and learn from him, which was really fun. So Christopher Solomon is a somatic Salvia guide, teacher, and inventor of a pipe that aids in the mindful exploration of Salvia divinorum. Incorporating lessons learned directly from Salvia and as a student of somatic psychotherapy, Christopher is pioneering techniques to use Salvia as a therapeutic tool for guided self-healing, meditation, and introspection. Christopher lectures about the proper, intentional, and therapeutic use of Salvia, offering a blend of scientific, esoteric, and therapeutic perspectives. He also cultivates a medicinal Salvia garden for use in his therapeutic practice with clients. His main goal is to teach people how to use Salvia for themselves in a manner that is supportive, informative, and empowering. He has a BA in psychology from the University of Texas at Dallas and received his training in somatic psychotherapy from the Hakomi Institute of California. So I'll leave it at that for Christopher's intro. Hope you enjoy it. A little bit of updates that's coming up. Navigating Psychedelics is probably going to start by the time you listen to this. And so check out psychedeliceducationcenter.com for some updates. I think we should have our new dates up pretty shortly after the release of this episode. And that will probably start on May 20th, which is a Thursday. So check that out. And if you missed March, definitely gone over to psychedeliceducationcenter.com. I'm so used to saying psychedelicstoday.teachable.com. Both of those will bring you to the same site. We also have a upcoming free webinar with Johanna Hille and Maria Papasora about Jung, the feminine, and dreams. So you can check that out too at psychedelicstoday.com. Go over to events, and there should be a tab there to sign up, and that is on March 15th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. It should be fun. A free webinar exploring, those topics of Jung, dreams. We'll talk about psychedelic integration, a little bit of dream technique. Should be a good time. And that's part of the Imagination as a Revelation class that Johanna Hille put together, which is an introduction to Jung and psychedelics. And I think that's about it for right now. I'm sure we have more things in the pipeline. So again, if you want to learn about our education, you can go over to psychedeliceducationcenter.com. We have some free classes over there. And if you go to the Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists course, there should be the new dates up there. So you'll be able to check that out. If you want to support us here, like us on all the social media, follow Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and leave us a review on iTunes. That helps us out a bunch over there. And be sure to subscribe on all your podcast apps that you listen to, Stitcher, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to leave a small monthly donation, you could check us out at Patreon. So patreon.com/psychedelicstoday. And that just helps us to keep this project going. So I think that's it, everybody. Again, I hope you enjoy this episode with Christopher Solomon, and we'll catch you on the other side. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have Christopher Solomon. Really excited to chat with you, Christopher. I know it's been a long time coming, and just excited. I mean, we're probably going to get into somatics and Salvia, so.
Yeah. And the two go together really well.
Yeah. Awesome. Can you give the listeners a little bit of background about who you are and your quick little bio?
Yeah. My name is Christopher Solomon, and I'm a somatic Salvia guide. So I incorporate the premises and the practices of mindfulness and somatic psychotherapy into low-dose, mindful Salvia divinorum use. So I like to think of myself as part guide, part teacher as well, because what I like to do as well is actually teach people how to use salvia in a way to where it's manageable and approachable and insightful and easy on the system. So, yeah.
Awesome. Salvia is kind of like an interesting plant medicine, and we don't seem to talk about it too much within the psychedelic world. And, we had maybe a few episodes, maybe one other episode about salvia. And we also have a nice blog article on our site about the therapeutic use of salvia. But I'm wondering if you could just give, a quick little intro on what is salvia. Maybe we have some listeners that this is the first time hearing about it and really don't know what it is. So.
Right. Yeah. So if, for your listeners who don't know what salvia is, but the name salvia sounds familiar, it's because salvia is one of the many different types of sages that they have out there. So there's, Salvia officinalis, which is like the regular sage that you'd use for cooking. There's over 700 different types of salvias. But there's this one particular type of salvia called Salvia divinorum, which is endemic to the Sierra Mazateca mountain ranges outside of Oaxaca in Mexico. When I say it's endemic, I mean that that's the only place that it grows naturally in the wild. And so up in the cloud forests in the Mazatec mountain ranges, there's the Salvia divinorum type of sage that grows. And it has very unique and very profound psychoactive properties. And it's been used for quite a while traditionally by the Sierra Mazatec indigenous people specifically for healing. They use mushrooms and other substances for multiple reasons, or for multiple end goals, if you want to think about it that way. But Salvia divinorum has a practice of being specifically applied to healing of physical, energetic, and emotional ailments.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And how did you really kind of start getting involved or interested in working with salvia?
Yeah. It was a long organic process that just pretty much unfolded over the course of quite a few years. I was first introduced to salvia when I was in high school, actually, because in the early 2000s, salvia started being sold in smoke shops all over America and on gas stations as well. And it's just odd to find a extremely powerful sacred plant medicine being sold at gas stations. But essentially, the Western world got turned on to salvia because it was sold incorrectly by many places as like an alternative to weed or another type of high. And so I was one of the many people who found out about salvia from buying it from a local smoke shop because someone told me about this weird and crazy thing that you can smoke, and it's bizarre, And so I first tried it out when I was in high school and smoked it and didn't really know what to make of it because it's a very unique and can be a foreign feeling experience. There's a sense of familiarity to it, but then there's also a sense of profound bizarreness and alien-like nature to the physical effects that it has on one's body. So I wasn't really too sure what to make of it at first. And, I used it a handful of times, just purely recreationally, which salvia is not very recreational at all, actually. And most people, they do salvia one time or two times, and then they just don't really want to do it again. And there's numerous reasons for that. The biggest reason is that people smoke too much salvia. They smoke a big bowl, and we can talk more about later about how to actually approach it mindfully and in smaller, subtle doses. But, I did it a handful of times, and I didn't really make much of it. And but then there was this one particular experience where I meditated before smoking salvia. And I'd never meditated beforehand smoking salvia, but this almost voice came to me and just said, wait, do a quick meditation beforehand. So I did just 10 slow, simple, deep breaths. Just deep breath in, deep breath out 10 times. And then on the 10th time, I inhaled some 20x extract. And the combination of meditating beforehand completely changed the salvia experience. It really just made it into almost a different substance. And
how so?
Well, it was the first time that I'd actually had any sort of visual perceptions, like visual changes from salvia. All the other times that I'd done it before, and I'd done the same amount of dosage, I just didn't see anything. And that's still quite common. Salvia is not a very visual substance. One gets the perception or one gets the impression of visuals, but it's not the same type of visuals that you would get with mushrooms or LSD,
Right.
DMT. But after I meditated with it, I had these kind of like parallel lines that came in from my peripheral vision and met in the middle of my vision. And these parallel lines looked almost like a see-through veil with luminous, but also dull at the same time colors of yellows and pinks in between them. And these colorful lines started to form what looked like sand dunes. And so I still knew I was sitting in my bedroom, but it also at the same time, it looked like I was sitting in a desert landscape. So that was the first thing that was unique and novel about it. I was just like, wow, it looks like I'm sitting in another landscape. And then while I was sitting in this other landscape, this very powerful and loving feminine presence materialized to my left, about a couple of feet away from me. And I'd never had any sort of experience with meeting an entity that is not another human being or not a living animal. I'd had previous experiences on Salvia where I had the perception that there were other beings in my apartment with me, but I never actually saw an entity.
This is the first time you saw one or just felt the presence of one?
I felt the presence of more than, because when I'd done Salvia before, it was with my roommates in college, so I knew it was me and like 3 other people in the room with me.
Right.
And I felt as if there were other things, other people. I thought, did some new people come into the apartment? But after meditating, this was the first time where I was actually presented with a very autonomous seeming, gender specific, loving presence, female entity that was standing there looking at me.
Wow.
And it was very remarkable because, aside from the fact that I was taken aback at seeing this entity, what was also amazing with it was the sense of emotion and love that was coming from this being. There was a very genuine, caring, telepathic connection that I had with this being that was made out of colorful, almost like magnetic-looking lines. And so when I saw this entity, I actually said to it, because there was this deep sense of recognition within me, and I said, "Oh, there you are." I actually said it out loud. And, what she said back to me was, "Yes, I'm here and I've always been here." And then we were just in this deep moment of beautiful connection for a couple of minutes. And then she faded and the sand dunes faded away. And, I was back in my room and I was just like, wow, this is the same Salvia I've smoked before. But that was the first thing that keyed me into the fact that there was more to this plant than initially meets the eye.
What do you think changed there for you? Do you think it was like setting that intention, whether, you weren't really thinking about intention, you're just like, I'm just going to meditate, or like thinking back about that experience, why do you think that was different for you?
Yeah, it was definitely because of the intentionality and because I just approached it with some sort of respect and some mindfulness.
Right.
And I knew it at the time, like as soon as the effect was different, I knew it was because I meditated beforehand and approached it differently.
I think this comes back to a really important point with working with plants. It's just the respect, right? And the relationship.
Yeah.
Before we start to engage with some of these medicines.
Yeah, the relationship one develops with because as one continues to use Salvia over time, you deepen your relationship with the plant. And what I've noticed when I work with it with myself and with my clients, because I guide people through Salvia journeys, and the more respectfully and cautiously and mindfully one approaches Salvia, the more rewards she kind of gives one. There's many gendered entities that I've noticed within the Salvia space, but the overall Salvia feeling is one of a feminine nature. And I don't even know like how I can say what that is, but it's just very clear that that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to say she. And she can tell the amount of close listening that you're doing to yourself. She communicates more with you.
Mm.
And this is where incorporating the somatic work comes into it as well, because a lot of somatics is essentially just listening to the present experience that's happening within your body with a sense of open-ended dynamic curiosity. And this open-ended curiosity and close tracking in a soft way of what's happening within your body. Not like a very focused attention, but kind of like a soft, open, scanning attention.
Curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity, and sort of like your consciousness is a lighthouse, just kind of going round and round inside your brain, just kind of scanning things. And so when you incorporate this mindfulness and tracking of subtleties within your body, that with Salvia works very well together. And Salvia seems to recognize when you are using mindfulness techniques with Salvia, and she just shows up in a different way.
It's so interesting. I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Peter Atty's work.
Yeah.
But I know Joe interviewed him for the podcast maybe last year or something like that. But I remember listening to the episode, and he was actually kind of talking about, the benefit here with somatic work. And Salvia divinorum seems to have this really interesting somatic effect on the body. And so it's really interesting to just, chat with you and maybe to learn more about like working with plant medicines somatically.
Yeah. Of all the plant medicines that I've really taken, Salvia is the most somatic as far as the fact that it takes one into one's body in a way that other medicines don't.
You have an example of that?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, depending on the dose. Also, Salvia is very dose dependent. If you take like a tiny bit of Salvia, now when I say a tiny bit, let's say you're smoking like extract. So the extracts come in different strengths. There's 1x, which is just plain leaf. And then there's 5x, which is like 5 times stronger than plain leaf, and 10x, 20x, all the way to like 100x. I never go above 5x because it's not really too necessary. But like a low dose of 5x Salvia extract would be the equivalent of smoking like 4 or 5 flakes of the extract.
Wow.
Just really, really a few tiny little pieces. And so at that amount, usually what happens is there just seems to be a sense of stillness that comes within the body. It's like a very settling medicine. It's settling and it's neutralizing in the direction to where your body needs to go as well. So, what I mean by that is, let's say you're kind of feeling like up and agitated and anxious, or you're feeling like a little bit manic or stressed, or high vibrations in your body, and you have a low dose of Salvia. What it'll do is it'll kind of just like bring you down to a nice stable baseline of just calmness within. But if you're feeling kind of low on energy and like down in the dumps and just kind of blue, or you feel like you're getting sick and your body's kind of achy and stuff like that, a little bit of Salvia, it'll kind of bring you up.
Oh, interesting.
So if you're up, it brings you down. If you're down, it brings you up. So that's one of the many archetypes or personifications that I've made of Salvia. One of them is being a great neutralizer. It just takes one to like a middle zone where everything's just fine.
Right.
So another way that it's somatic is, there's so many ways, but like another one is that one feels kind of like a physical tingly energy, pins and needles, prickly gravity feeling that washes over one's body. And one becomes quite aware of the fact that what you're feeling feels like the energies that make up your consciousness and your perception. And so it's very potent energetic medicine as well, to where your energetic body feels more real than your physical body. And one can become very aware of the meeting of the two. You're like, okay, this is the physical manifestation of my body. This is the actual 3D meat and bones structure. And then within that and around that, there's this energy that's animating it and providing life to it. And making the body have consciousness. And so one can feel those two components quite clearly when one's on a lowish dose of Salvia.
And what about higher doses? So, do you get this? I'm wondering what your take is on, like, I guess I've heard it described as this, and I've definitely felt this before, kind of like distortions in gravity where you're getting pushed and pulled in
Right.
certain directions and feels like, you have kind of like no control over anything. And I'm sure if you grew up, what was it, during the 2000s with the YouTube boom, we definitely saw a lot of those videos of people just acting pretty erratic and
Right. Right.
interesting, like body movements and behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few things. If so those high dose experiences where you feel like you're kind of being pushed and pulled around, or you get turned into a wheel, or you feel like you're getting flattened by a steamroller, or you become a two-dimensional plane. Let's see. Before one gets to that stage where you feel like, oh my gosh, I've turned into a wheel, there's a stage where you still feel yourself as your body, but you do feel those energy those waves of energy pulling and pushing, and that salvia gravity moving through your body. So, people think like, okay, I felt these weird energy lines, or I felt this gravity pulling through my body. So what? What do I actually do with this? This is where the mindful engagement comes in with salvia, because you can actually use that salvia gravity feeling that you're having. You can apply that to certain areas in your body where you're feeling particular emotions, or you're feeling any sort of like biological or muscular tightness or inflammation. You can actually use your imagination and your thinking mind to send those salvia gravity waves to specific parts in your body.
Mm.
And that can be very useful when dealing with certain emotions. Like if you're feeling, if we think of, think about how it feels when you're anxious versus when you're happy and in a state of bliss. When you're feeling anxious about something, it's kind of a stuck feeling. You feel kind of stagnant. Things are kind of moving around, but in a very choppy way. It feels like there's contraction within the body. It feels like a lack of movement and a lack of motion. But then when you're in a sort of like a blissful flow state, it feels like there's energy, and it feels like there's more movement within the body. And so if you're feeling anxious, or you're feeling upset about something, or you're stuck in a thought loop where you're replaying arguments you've had with people in your head and things like that, anywhere where there's sort of a blockage, an energy blockage, the meditating with salvia, this salvia energy that starts to move through your body actually begins to move those stuck energetic blockages that are within your being.
Mm.
So there's a lot of people that I work with where they have, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of times people feel anxiety in the chest and in their stomach. And they'll smoke, a small amount of salvia, and the salvia gravity will just come in and just kind of like water washing things away. It just, it provides movement and newness. And another thing it does is it provides a sense of space within the body. So, there's one's body feels a little bit bigger, and one feels the space within one's body in a different way while on salvia. And so this extra spaciousness that gets introduced within one's sense perceptions, because it feels as if there's more space within yourself, there's actually more space for you to deal with or feel the feelings that are there.
Right.
Because again, when one's feeling emotionally overwhelmed by things, let's say you have a craving for something, or you have an impulse for something. A craving and an impulse is a big feeling that comes up within the body very quickly, and it kind of feels like it takes you over, and it feels like it's all encompassing within your being, and the only thing you can think about is this thing that's on your mind. The only thing you can think about is the craving, or the impulse, or the anxiety, or the fear. It's almost as if there's this autonomic entity in you that's just kind of taken over. And so it can feel as if you don't have enough space within yourself to handle the big feelings that you're feeling. But when you meditate with salvia, what happens is there's an introduction of added space. And with this very literal felt sense of more space within one's body. And this is why salvia is so effective, because it's extremely tactile. You feel the sense of extra added spaciousness within your body. And this extra space that gets given to you means that the big impulse or the big craving that you're having beforehand doesn't feel as big anymore. And so it loses some of its power.
Mm.
And so it's the combination of incorporating a sense of stillness, incorporating a sense of space, and introducing a sense of movement within the body from a somatic standpoint, that it really helps just settle and reset one's being.
Thank you for that.
And from that space, when you're in a space of settled, calm awareness, you can think a little bit clearer as well. One's true voice starts to come through. So one's sense of intuition becomes a lot stronger with Salvia as well.
Yeah, I love that you just kind of bring up this spaciousness. I'm just thinking back to various experiences that I've had with different plant medicines, and just thinking about that anxiety. Thinking about anxiety in a normal state, yeah, it feels like small. And since I am somatically oriented, like I can try to create that spaciousness to explore it. But with these working with the plant medicines, it does feel like when you start to open up and that there's like more stuff to explore there. Yeah. It's like you can feel that anxiety go into it, explore it in a much different way.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting. And I think, when I think about like navigation skills with, any sort of plant medicine, it's like, how do we start to attune to the body and really explore that inner landscape, that inner space?
Yeah. And another thing that Salvia provides somatically is a feeling of safety. It's very good if one's activated or feeling scared, or you have any sort of trauma. There's something about now again, this is when one does it slowly and mindfully by smoking small repeated doses in a row. Instead of smoking one big bowl, smoke multiple tiny bowls in a row. And what that introduces into the body as well is just this feeling of healthy autonomy and safety within one's body. There's a sense of being supported. I was working with someone recently, and they said they could feel scaffolding around their body that was supporting their body. So there's one particular person felt it as scaffolding. Another person said that they felt it as if they were being lifted up by two big hands. A very, very common experience in Salvia is the sense of being held and supported and lifted up. And so with the spaciousness, you can be in a spacious environment, but if you don't feel safe, you're not really going to want to explore the environment that you're in.
Right.
So it's kind of critical that there's the added sense of safety. And because Salvia works on a non-visual, non-verbal way of communication, it's communicating with you through your body. And that's why I say it's a somatic medicine as well. Your body is getting the cue, oh, I'm safe. And it is safe to think these thoughts. It's safe to explore this added room that I have. Because sometimes if you're doing somatic work with people and they do feel extra space within them, many times it can be quite overwhelming and it can be scary. They're like, oh man, like, I don't know what's there. It's scary. What if I find something that I don't like? What if there's something like the boogeyman hiding within my subconscious, and I don't want to confront my shadow. And so spaciousness can be scary. But there is this, Salvia is also, it's a physical analgesic. It's a painkiller. And it also seems to be a bit of an emotional fear painkiller. So it's not numbing. Salvia doesn't numb one, but it just takes one to, again, this place of neutrality. So because it's taken you to a place of neutrality and one's feeling safe, there's courage and curiosity. That it's actually those states together that nurture the sense of the space of curiosity. So it's kind of like a trifecta, or more than a trifecta. It's just many, many multiple somatic components that naturally seem to come about when doing Salvia with mindfulness and with small repeated doses.
Thank you for that. And yeah, thanks for, I guess, like highlighting that small dose. Because I mean, when you were saying like salvia can create that safety. I'm thinking about my first experience, and probably smoking a much higher dose than normal, just getting it at a shop when I was like 19 or 20 with some friends, and being like, what is this all about? And not being in a safe physical environment, really. Or I guess no, I was in a safe physical environment. It was just kind of a weird thing, but
Yeah.
immediately feeling anxiety and fear of I need to get out of here.
Right.
And having that weird distortion with gravity, something pushing me, running around in circles, having no control over it.
Yeah, it feels like it can at the high dose literally feel like you're being ripped apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I stress the slow, low doses, because at an excellent definition of trauma or traumatic event is too much happening too soon, too quickly.
Yeah.
And so it becomes overwhelming. And so even I'm well versed in Salvia space. I've done it many times, but I don't even take big hits right off the bat, because if I do, it's just too much for me. And it doesn't give your body time to acclimate. I kind of say it's also like getting into like a very hot tub. If you have a very hot tub and you just jump straight in, your immediate instinct is to jump straight out.
Right.
But if you slowly work your way in, even though you're getting into the exact same water with the exact same temperature, you give yourself time to acclimate. So this going slowly, I think about it as a form of somatic priming. Like you're priming your body to get used to the unique salvic pulling and pushing forces. So it's not foreign. So then you can get to the higher doses where you do become a time slice of consciousness. And which also has many wonderful benefits as well.
Yeah.
And you can go to deep salvia spaces, but if you go slowly, it's accessible and acceptable.
Yeah, and this is like an interesting concept, and I've been thinking about this often since my somatic training. And, I kind of come out of the breathwork world where it's very cathartic. And I think some of the newer somatic research started to have me question that. I forget what book it was in, but they were talking about a lot of the primal cathartic experiential therapies that came out of Esalen can really re-trigger trauma if not done in a safe setting, if people didn't have that resolution, feeling safe enough to do that. And I think this idea of titration, pendulation kind of comes out of some of, Peter Levine's work and this somatic approach. And, this is a topic I was discussing. We put together a shadow class panel a few months ago. And this idea within the psychedelic world of just having big experiences right off the bat and really kind of seeking for ego death or transcendence versus this other approach where you take smaller doses, you start to slowly build a relationship with the medicine. And yeah, it's just interesting. I think a lot, maybe I'm generalizing here, but people kind of within that somatic world, maybe we take that approach because maybe we've learned jumping in the deep end right away wasn't always useful. And maybe could be longer term benefit by working smaller doses, building that relationship, building that safety internally, building the safety with the medicine too, and then kind of being able to go into those other higher realms.
Right.
And I think at that point you'll have enough as a skill set and maybe enough regulation to be able to tolerate those bigger and higher experiences.
Totally, exactly. Yeah. When we think of transformation or transformative experiences, we think about these big, explosive, cathartic things like, oh my gosh, my entire life flashed before my eyes and I could understand everything. And boom, I had this big transformation and now I'm healed.
Yeah.
And, that can happen. But the real transformations are, transformations happen in small, bite-sized moments that can be integrated, like, taking that small sip of air, like that, getting that one deep breath in if you haven't had a deep breath in a long time. So I'm a big fan of working in the subtle spaces. And I work with a lot of people who have come to me, they want to work with me because they had big, ayahuasca, LSD, even MDMA, very large cathartic experiences. And it was traumatizing for them. And it was terrifying. Yeah, there's some people, someone recently I was working with, he had a big, scary LSD experience like 35 years ago.
Wow.
And he's still kind of shook up from it. And so being able to explore the subtleties that are, because there's a lot there, when you slow down and look at the subtleties that are happening within the body, and when you incorporate body work and micro movements and things like that, there's a lot to explore. So there's, I've had very big, cathartic healing experiences as well. But the ones that seem to actually stick with me for the long term are the ones that I was engaged with mindfully and on the level of subtlety and present awareness.
Right. Yeah. And I think something that always pops into my head is like Dr. Dan Siegel talking about integration and really trying to integrate information within the nervous system, and thinking about how some of these bigger experiences can really dysregulate our nervous system. And how do we really integrate that if it's really kind of activated us, instead of maybe taking this like more titrated approach to slowly start to maybe encode that safety within our nervous system and be able to work with it
right,
in a much different way.
And yeah, for sure. And again, that's why I find Salvia to be so helpful for so many people, because again, of that safety aspect, because it can make one feel, again, if done. So there's this pipe that I use with my clients. It's the Salvia pipe that I designed, and I manufactured myself. And it's a pipe with 5 bowls that you can preload beforehand. And so that way you can load all your Salvia bowls beforehand. And so you don't have to be fussing around and fiddling with reloading bowls mid-journey. So you can stay in a mindful state while you're working with Salvia. And which I got the idea for this pipe while I was meditating with Salvia, because I was trying to explore, I'd smoke a little bit and then I'd feel, good and want to go a little bit deeper, but I'd have to like stop my journey and reload the bowl. And I was just like, wouldn't it be great if I could actually have, a bunch of bowls in one pipe preloaded already? And so knowing that one has a small amount of Salvia loaded in each bowl as well also helps give one's body a sign that one's being safe about things, because that each bowl in and of itself is not too much.
Right. When I first saw the pipe, I was like, how much are you packing in there? And this, I thought like, man, who wants to do that? That sounds scary. But now knowing, you're kind of taking this very low dose. I mean, would you, I guess you wouldn't consider it a micro dose because it's not sub-perceptual, but just very low dose Salvia.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And one can do like a microdose with Salvia as well, where you just take one tiny hit and you just have like a little 10-minute meditation with it. And it's a very good way of just like coming back to oneself and just kind of feeling like a little bit refreshed. Like Salvia makes me feel a lot cleaner afterwards as well. There's this clean, light feeling that comes in. And the way I've felt it, and other people that I work with have felt it as well, is it feels kind of like your psyche leaves your body. And while your psyche is no longer in your body, like this cleaning crew comes in and just kind of tidies everything up and reorganizes everything and, repatterns all your old energy patterns and stuff like that. And it's very good at getting rid of just old emotional baggage that you're kind of holding on to.
Yeah.
And oftentimes one doesn't even know that one's holding on to the baggage until one feels it cleared from one's field. You're like, wow, I didn't realize I was holding on to all this crap.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, how much education, do you need to do with clients beforehand? And, has it been hard to, be a salvia guide finding clients? Because I'm just imagining, like, I think most people have a very weird taste in their mouth when it comes to salvia. They go,
Yeah.
I had an experience when it was first starting hitting the streets. It was weird. I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
And it's not within the realm of like, classical traditional psychedelics. And people don't really think there's a lot of healing happening there. Because when we mention it on the show or to other people are like, what? Salvia?
Yeah.
Like everybody's like, I'll never touch that stuff again. It was terrifying.
Yep. There is a large educational component to it, which is why I give lectures and why I teach and stuff like that. And yeah, it's not an easy sell, I'm in a niche market. I'm selling a difficult to sell product, but which is completely fine with me because I don't want to just be selling. I don't think about it as a salesman, but there is that educational component where one has to learn how to do salvia correctly. Anyone can kind of take some MDMA and have it be an okay experience, given that you're in a safe setting and you don't take too much. But yeah, there is the initial hump to get over where people are just like, man, I'm not going to do salvia again. But many people that I work with who have never done salvia before, and I work with quite a few people who they've never even done any psychedelics before. And those people actually almost seem to they pick up on what salvia is all about a little bit faster than some people who have done other psychedelics, mainly because it's a thing about expectations.
Right. Or mushrooms or ayahuasca superior over salvia or something like that, like having those expectations.
Or they're looking for DMT-like effects.
Right.
So there are some people that they're sitting there and their eyes are closed and they're looking around the room looking for visuals, they're looking for, and I'm thinking to myself there's not going to see stuff, So a lot of it is just and that's where the learning curve comes in as well. Learn what the salvia experience is like. And no other psychedelics can really prepare one for it because it's completely unique and it's completely novel. It's not like DMT. It's not like ayahuasca. You're not going to see colorful. One can, but it's a lot of the educational component as well is just teaching people how to sit still for a couple of minutes with their eyes closed and track what's going on. That's just challenging on a regular day for lots of people. Mm-hmm. So there's also the somatic education component as well. It's just I'm teaching one about somatic therapy and teaching one about how to explore the salvia state. And then on top of that, there's also how does one analyze what happens during a salvia experience? Because salvia communicates with one symbolically and metaphorically and somatically. So the messages that one gets from salvia are given to one in a different way. So it's almost like dream interpretation, but it's salvia state interpretation. So that's another part of what I do with people. They have the experience, I track what's going on during the experience, and then we can kind of make meaning out of it.
Right.
But one doesn't have to as well. That's a nice thing about salvia as well, because it does work on such a subconscious and archetypal symbolic level. You don't have to make any meaning out of it. It can be difficult actually to tell the story of what's happened to one after a salvia experience. So there's almost like a lack of a story to tell, but there's still healing and there's just a felt sense of feeling better. And people are like, I can't really explain what happened, but I'm just feeling better. Yeah. Which is nice.
Yeah. Some of my experiences, and I guess this kind of comes into one of my questions I wanted to ask. So some of my experiences with some of the tincture form were kind of like dreamlike. You were talking about visualizations, and for me, it kind of had these dreamlike images to work with. But so, my one question I wanted to ask you is, why choose smoking salvia? I think some people might know that, from the traditional perspective, they say the spirit doesn't like to be smoked, and this oral consumption through chewing the leaves. Do you have any take on that? Have you experimented with oral versus smoking?
Oh yeah, For sure. I've tried fresh leaf because I have a medicinal salvia garden, so I enjoy chewing the fresh leaves. And I've also done a combination of tincture and leaves together, and just straight tincture and smoking it. As far as smoking it being frowned upon, that's something that I was kind of battling with for a while, because I was getting profound healing effects. Salvia, I've also had some incredible healing experiences from salvia where it healed swollen lymph nodes in my neck, and I use it instead of antibiotics. So whenever I'm getting sick, I haven't had an antibiotic in over 10 years because salvia boosts your immune system, and there's been lots of studies on that. And so I was just like, man, like I'm actually getting a lot of benefit from smoking it, but I've heard that this plant doesn't like being smoked. And I didn't really know how to reconcile those two in my mind. And so this was a few years ago, I loaded some salvia in just like a regular little glass pipe. And, I smoked it, and I felt like the salvia effects coming on. And there was almost like a burning quality to the feeling that was going through my body. And, and Salvia said quite clearly to me, and I still laugh because she called me dude. She said, look, dude, she was like, if you're going to smoke me, please at least pass me through some water and cool me down through some water. And it was clear as day. I was just like, okay. Because all the other times I'd smoked it through a bong. And then one time that I smoked it through a pipe, she was just like, no. It's like, pass me through water, because that gives me the wetness that I need, and it cools me down. And
interesting.
It was really, really interesting. And I felt the difference of this, like smoking it not through water felt different to me.
So does your pipe that you offer, is that a water bong essentially?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I went with the water route as well. And it just makes it a nicer smoke as well. So it's essentially, it's a water pipe with 5 bowls that you preload beforehand. And now, so the reason why I recommend people start with smoking, and the reason why I start with my clients smoking, is, so there's a few things. And there's also a reason why I choose to start with smoking extract versus the plain leaf. And the main reason is because dosing is more reliable and consistent with the standardized extract.
Right.
Because a salvia leaf has the same amount of salvinorin A on it. So salvinorin A is the psychoactive component in it. A salvia leaf has pretty much the same amount of salvinorin A on it, no matter what the size of the leaf is. So you can have a leaf that's 1 inch big, and then you can let that leaf continue to grow on the plant till it gets 6 inches big. But whether it's 6 inches big or whether it's 1 inch big, it has the same amount of salvia on it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so that's also why, like the Mazatecs, when they chew salvia leaves, they do it by pairs of numbers. And I was always thinking, like, why chew like 16 leaves? That doesn't make sense. Why not go by weight? But it's actually because the weight means less than the number of leaves that you're having. So you can have 16 huge leaves and have X amount of salvia, or you can have 16 tiny leaves and have the same amount of salvia on it. And so for that reason, it makes smoking the plain leaf or chewing the leaves a little bit variable. It introduces some variability, because when you buy the plain leaves online, usually you buy the leaves all kind of crushed up. And you don't know if the leaf that you're smoking was from a small leaf or a big leaf. And so it makes the dosing a little bit more difficult with plain leaf. Also, one just uses a whole lot less smoke when I'm smoking the standardized extract, because it's just like a few tiny flakes.
Right.
So I like to start people with the extract, so I know how to dose them. And, I do salvia sessions remotely via Zoom now. Since this whole COVID thing started, I moved my sessions online, and they've been working really, really well, actually.
Do you get any, I know you're starting kind of low with doses, but do you ever get nervous with any sort of movement, or if people have like an adverse reaction.
Yeah,
Doing
no one's, because I've got my dosing down pretty accurately. And so I just know what to dose people to where they're not going to get to a state of moving around.
oh yeah.
Also, the first bowl that one smokes, it's kind of not much to feel much of anything. So it's super slow and gradual and gentle. Yeah. And most people find most of the benefits at the low to mid dose range anyway. So, but that was one of my concerns before I started working with people remotely. I was all like, oh, well, I'm not going to be in the room with them. You know, what if they get up and start moving around, or what if they get scared? But again, because there's the slow going and because there's a sense of safety that comes within the body, like people don't get scared. And and I send the Salvia 2-1 pre-dosed in places where it's legal. I send the pre-dosed Salvia in little gel caps.
Oh, awesome.
And so, and I send the Salvia pipe as well. So, you know, I send the pipe and I send the dose. So there's no guesswork for the person. And then they can learn what their ideal dosage is. My long-term goal is to teach people how to use the plant themselves so they don't have to keep coming back to me, because I really do want this to be a resource that people can use when and as needed.
And for people to use it on their own, again, I guess if we're considering low dose, you know, is a sitter needed? I remember one time I went to a shop. I don't know if it was legal yet in Pennsylvania, but, you know, they pointed at these pipes and said, one thing's one thing, but if it requires a sitter, like they were so mad that I was even asking about it. So they were really kind of emphasizing like the sitter aspect. And this was years and years ago. But yeah, I mean, do you recommend people when they start to move into that space by themselves to have a sitter around, or working with low doses, maybe it's not going to maybe get as scary or...
Right. It's not as necessary when you're working with the low doses. But then again, when people are dosing themselves for the first time and they don't really know what a low or high dose is, because when you're using the extract, the margin of error is small.
Right.
So that's why that's another part of the educational component. By me sending the pre-measured doses to you, you know, oh, this is what a small dose looks like. But if one just has some Salvia extract at home and one wants to try it and one doesn't really know what one's dosage is yet, I always recommend sitting with a sitter. But when I work with people, by the time they're ready to work with it alone by themselves, you know, they don't need a sitter.
Right. And so I want to come back to that idea of the difference between smoking and tincture. Mm-hmm. Have you found anything different with the tincture form?
Yeah. So the difference between smoking and tincture is, the biggest difference is just the time in which the experience unfolds. When using tincture, so one thing actually I do recommend is if one does use tincture, I like to incorporate either some dried salvia leaves with it or some fresh leaves. And the reason why is because when you use just the straight tincture, it's a high-proof alcohol. So when you're holding high-proof alcohol in your mouth for like 15, 30 minutes,
burns your tongue.
You get blisters on your lip and your gum, and it's kind of astringent. So I like putting like a little bit of salvia leaves in my mouth and the tincture together, and the leaves absorb the tincture. And
interesting.
And then it takes like the astringent burniness, or it makes it less caustic on the inside of one's mouth.
And then you don't need to dilute that then.
Right.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah. So the one thing is the length of time in which it takes to unfold. So usually, if you smoke salvia, the effects hit it within, 15 to 30 seconds. You peak for a couple of minutes and then you come back down. But now when you use the method of smoking repeated bowls, you can kind of choose when to go the next level deeper based on when you use to smoke that next bowl. So the smoking multiple bowls does give one more agency in as far as like how deep one wants to go. Because you can smoke the bowl, come to the peak, and then start to come down, and then choose to smoke the next bowl when you're close to being down again and kind of go back into the space. Or you can be at the peak and then choose to smoke the next bowl and then go deeper and then wait till you're at that peak and then next bowl, and you can go in that way. But with the tincture, it's a lot more gradual. The effects start to hit within 6 to 15 minutes. You start to feel it. And then it's an hour and a half, 2-hour experience. But it's a lot more gentle as far as the fact to where you're not totally going to get transported into Salvia land with tincture generally, but one can. So one can go as deep with tincture and as deep with chewing leaves as one can with smoking. I've definitely had some like, oh shit moments with tincture and leaves. So I was like chewing the leaves and I was like, things are fine. And I'm feeling all this warmth coming through my body. And then all of a sudden I was just like, oh, like, where am I? Who am I? It was like the amnesia kicked in very suddenly. And so when that does happen, if you're chewing it or using tincture, then you can just kind of spit the leaves out. And then once you spit the leaves out, or you spit the tincture out, then you slowly start to come down.
Right.
I've also noticed that there's a more pronounced and longer lasting afterglow when you chew or use tincture. So like orally taking salvia seems to just provide a bigger boost in antidepressant and anti-anxiety effects that last longer. So, I'll go, if I want to do yoga or body work or any movement while on salvia, I prefer to go the tincture or chewing the leaves route, because it's kind of difficult to explain, but one's perception of one's internal state, physical, I guess I can say that when you're on salvia and you're doing any sort of movement, micro movements can feel like macro movements. So any like small adjustments that you make can feel like very, very big adjustments. And so that's why doing yoga or doing any sort of movement while on low to medium doses of salvia is very useful as well, because one finds oneself moving in a way where salvia is moving your body more so than you're moving your body. If I'm doing any sort of yoga on salvia, it's almost like it turns into a cross between like Tai Chi and yoga. And I find myself doing these movements that I would never otherwise even think of doing. So
I find that with cannabis as well.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like cannabis is a really great somatic medicine too.
Right. Yeah, I do too. I'm trying to see if I can describe what the differences between bodywork and cannabis or movement on cannabis versus movement on salvia.
It's definitely a different experience, that's for sure.
For sure.
My last experience with salvia was oral, and was greeted. What was that? With tincture, yeah. And was greeted with that feminine entity, and it was very beautiful. It gave me a really profound message about some of the stuff, and but it also had this really interesting, you were saying numbing, like I could feel like my skin feel a little bit different. It almost felt like my body was a little numb, and I'm guessing that's because of the kappa opioid, the way that it binds to those receptors. And I just found it to be, I guess, more internal. I mean, cannabis can be really internal, but just the body sensations with salvia it's just very unique. And I wonder on, with the receptors that are being activated and whatnot, how that's, making the experience different. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And also because salvia takes one, this is another thing that I haven't really heard people say about salvia, but then again, there's not too many people talking about it.
No.
So it's common on salvia to have childhood memories come up or to feel like one's back in childhood. And I think that's because salvia takes one into one's body. And one's childhood memories, and a lot of one's memories are stored within the body. And so by one's awareness being actually physically taken into one's body, you're accessing those old memories because your awareness is actually accessing those parts of your body. And because you're also accessing a part of your body in such a tactile way, it helps inform one's body on how to hold itself and how to move when one's doing any sort of movement practice on it. So it's a very informative body worker.
Mm.
Another thing is it's common for people to experience becoming a zipper on salvia.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, it's a very, and I'm thinking like, why a zipper, you know?
Yeah.
But then I was watching an animation one time of actually how our chromosomes and our DNA replicate.
Oh, I've been watching a bunch of that actually recently, and it's so trippy.
Right. So the way that like your RNA molecule and then they feed into each other and they kind of split into two. If you look at an animation of DNA replicating, it looks exactly like what the salvia zipper feels like.
Mm.
So
yeah, what is that one protein called? Like Cas32?
Yeah, there's Cas9, but that's for CRISPR.
Oh, yeah, I was just watching a whole documentary on CRISPR. That's probably why it's popping in my head. And I was watching the DNA stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, I was thinking that like maybe the experience of feeling the zipper while on salvia is actually because and again, it only happens at a certain depth.
Right.
Of the salvia space. So at the lighter doses, when one's only a little bit into one's body, like when one's in one's muscles and one's skeleton, if you think about, imagine the more salvia one smokes, the more it takes one into one's body. So when one has a little bit of salvia or choose a light dose of salvia and one gets taken into the first few layers of our musculoskeletal structure, or even within our organs, that might, kick off their childhood memories because we're experiencing them through our body. But maybe we're experiencing the zipper because we go so deep within our bodies that we're actually getting taken to the felt experience of our DNA replicating. Mm. It's just like a little theory that I had. I was just like, because it's odd that it's so common for so many people to experience a zipper. And then when I saw DNA replicating animation, I'm like, that's exactly what that feels like.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I've actually been thinking about this a lot recently because I've been, watching, this exact stuff. I don't know why I've been diving down these holes or just seeing a picture of a cell at like, magnified times whatever. And it just looks so psychedelic. And I'm looking at some of this stuff and going, I've had visions like this in like an ayahuasca experience or on like high dose psilocybin. And so I start to hypothesize that as well. It's like, are we starting to tap into that? And Jeremy Narby actually brought that up in The Cosmic Serpent, talking about, maybe the shamans see the snake and that's their narrative. And maybe, we're communicating to our DNA. And I know he kind of had this whole thing about like photon particles being emitted from the DNA and
like
us.
Bioluminescence? Well, it wasn't bioluminescence.
I forget the term that he used, but and if you looked at like, Francis Crick, there was that statement that he said, if it wasn't for LSD, discovering the double helix. But then again, I don't know. I think watching all this stuff on like DNA replication, there was actually somebody that hypothesized a double helix before Crick. So, which was a woman, which was really interesting. Crick and Francis got the
no surprise there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, when we're interacting with plant medicines, what are they doing to us on that, like, cellular level? And, do we ever kind of get to communicate to that? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, coming from the transpersonal world, it's definitely possible. If we're thinking about, like, the Graphian transpersonal domains, anything's possible to be able to have those type of experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And, but again, the nice thing about salvia experience is because there is like a lack of a story, or it makes it, because it's communicating with us non-verbally, we don't have to have well put together explanations or stories about what happened to us during our salvia experience. Just the process of being taken to a place of deep, restful stillness and openness is healing in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And then also there's the sense of salvia witnessing us. There's quite a few times when I've spoken to people and they have the perception of the Salvia presence witnessing them and looking at them. And they feel as if they're being witnessed and looked at extremely empathetically. So it's common for Salvia for the people that I'm working with, to have the experience of them feeling Salvia seeing their sadness.
Oh, wow.
And then there's usually like a big sigh of relief, and there's just like, wow, yeah, like I feel seen. Like, so there's this power in being witnessed, and it's not like they're being scrutinized. It's like they're being looked at with empathy and love and compassion. And so that coupled with, again, the sense of feeling like you're in a safe space within your body, with movement and flow and energy, and then you're having a loving entity supporting you and witnessing you, and being supportive and caring towards any of your old past wounds. That's a healthy experience for the body you have.
Sounds like the spirit of Salvia is like a therapist, creating that safe space to be witnessed, heard, seen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it really, really is. And it just seems to happen automatically with so many people. It's how the plant operates.
That's fascinating. And are you kind of collecting, there's not too much research in Salvia. I know Hopkins has done some brain imaging with Salvia, but I mean, it doesn't seem like there's too much research within this world. I mean, Peter Addy is a researcher that comes to mind, the Hopkins stuff. And, I've come across your work here and there, but it's such it's such a strange plant, and I'm just so curious, like, why people kind of steer away from it, because it's a legal option in some states, right? And so, what is the potential here? Is there potential here for either self-discovery or some sort of therapeutic use case?
Oh gosh, so much, so much. It's like I wouldn't be doing this if it didn't work.
Right.
Because if Salvia wasn't like working and helping people, I'd be like, okay, well, I guess I'll figure something else out in my life. Yeah, exactly. But the fact that it's accessible, the fact that one can have like a 45-minute Salvia meditation and then go right on with one's day. You don't have to take the day off. You don't have to be throwing up. It's very easy to integrate. It almost integrates itself for you. The fact that it's as accessible as it is, that it's very easy on the nervous system, it's very easy physiologically as well, and it's very pragmatic. Salvia very, very quickly gets to the heart of an issue. If you also are trying to come up with any sort of make decisions in your life, and you're waffling back and forth and making lists of pros and cons, and debating with yourself, and then getting guidance from other people, and you're not sure where to go, you bring those questions to Salvia, and she very quickly gets straight to the heart of the matter. So she can be a little bit stern sometimes, but it's always lovingly stern. She really doesn't waste any time. So there's something really valuable in the pragmatic, quick acting, easily accessible, easily integratable experience, where it is actually a tool that one can incorporate into one's life.
Well, it was interesting you say that, because that was my experience recently with that kind of like this stern, pragmatic approach to something. And I was like, and it just came out of nowhere. Like wasn't even an intention of mine. And I was just kind of like taken back by that. I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
But it was, obviously a little bit different. I feel like some of the experiences I've had, either with like cannabis or some psychedelics, it kind of has like this trickster sternness. It's like, there's like a lot of trickery there at times. Yeah. But this felt just like a nice presence of like, here's some information. Yeah,
right. Yeah. And I feel like the sternness it's not coming, you're not being chastised and you're not being yelled at.
Yeah.
But also, my experience and many other people's experience as well is that there's a sense that Salvia really does want what's best for you. And Salvia really believes in the individual's ability to take matters into their own hands and do what they need to do with their life. So it's because Salvia has so much faith in us and so much empathy and so much compassion, and understands where we come from, understands what our capabilities are, understands where we can go. So it's very much the sense of, Salvia is just like, look, I know you can do what you need to be doing, like if you're not doing what you need to be doing, it's because you're kind of choosing that.
Yeah.
And so she's just like, I have faith in you that you can step up to the plate, and you need to step up to the plate. But it's always with a sense of like loving intention as well. Right. So it's not like toughen up and stand up on your own 2 feet, because that's kind of violent and abusive in a way, like this whole tough love thing. It's experienced more than tough than love, Where with Salvia is just like, I know you can do it. And I'm like, so you just do it. And I'm going to support you at the same time, Yeah. I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to be here with you. Right. There's this supportive aspect to it as well. And it's kind of like, because I have so much faith in you, and because you're getting my support as well, there's no reason for you not to do what you know you're going to do.
Yeah. This is so interesting to, I guess, just maybe you kind of have a shamanic type of background. We're talking about plant spirits in a sense, and talking about that entity. But, just talking about like these messages, and also the way that you were talking about kind of creating the smoked form with the water, and hearing, hey, use water with it. I don't know. Did you ever come across Twig Harper?
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember I was at a conference. It was one of the first symposia conferences, I think, here on the East Coast in Massachusetts. And he had this whole thing about how he was working with Salvia, and like, it was like, oh, well, I was like doing some float tank stuff. And then Salvia was telling me to experiment this way. And the Salvia was telling me to do this and do that. And it's really interesting to hear you kind of say that, and just think about what Twig's story was at one time. And yeah, it's interesting, really interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's interesting to me when it happens. Kind of like with your recent, tincture experience, you're like, whoa, where did this come from?
Yeah.
I'm like, nowhere. Oh. And it's like coming from you, but it's not coming from you.
Right.
And this is another thing as well. People are like, oh, what if I'm just imagining these things and therefore it doesn't really have any effect? But another thing that I almost forgot to mention actually is the power of actively engaging with your imagination while you're on Salvia.
Right.
So, again, when you're in a Salvia space, like your physical body or your energetic body feels more real than your physical body. And also your thoughts and your imagination feel like concrete, real living structures. Mm-hmm. So it's wonderful when you're on the Salvia state to actually engage your imagination and imagine outcomes for you. Imagine what you want for yourself. Imagine the healing that you need physically happening in your body right then. And there's something about using your imagination while in the Salvia space. Again, because one's thoughts feel so concrete, right? One can actually feel the place from within one's psyche from where thoughts are born. And it's the same with imagination. So just for like listeners out there who do use Salvia, next time you do it, try like actively engage your imagination while you're on it, and imagine whatever it is that you want for yourself.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like the Jungian active imagination practices, like how you just work with it, right? Like we could say, oh, what if it's not real? It's like, how do we, and I guess this gets like depth oriented. It's like working with the psyche, working with it, right? Engaging with it. And, if it creates change, doesn't matter if it's real or not.
Right.
Yeah. So I see that we're getting at time. I want to ask you kind of like a silly question, but Joe just sent me an image that from Dr. Andrew Gallimore. I guess he recently tweeted this about, I don't remember what it was, semi-synthetic methyl ox. I don't know. I forget but it was Salvinorin B. And he said, this is like a Salvinorin A trip up that could last up to 3 hours. And he asked, would anybody smoke this? Would anybody experiment with it? And everybody's like, hell no. Do you think like you would be curious if there was like a 3 hour salvia like trip from Salvinorin B?
Oof.
Or some semi-synthetic Salvinorin B? I forget what the molecule was.
Yeah. I would say yes, but only because I've been comfortable with chewed experiences that were, a chewed experience can last 2.5 hours. I did have a chewed experience one time where I was chewing and just kept chewing more leaves, and it lasted for like 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But again, it was like, let's say, like if 0 is no salvia, 10 is you're outside of time and space and don't exist anymore. This was a chewed experience where I was constantly at like level 7 for the entire time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
For 3 hours about. Wow.
Pretty much, yeah. But it was wonderful. It was extremely blissful. It was really, really nice. But if smoking this like semi-synthetic salvia, I don't know, like I wonder if the synthetic stuff would have the same sense of presence of the salvia entity, or if it would, if it would feel kind of devoid. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I know. So there is salvinorin A very quickly metabolizes into salvinorin B in your system.
Oh, it does. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So the salvinorin A, B, and I believe C. And so salvinorin A kicks off the effects, but then I believe very quickly metabolizes into salvinorin B.
Oh, okay. Fascinating.
Yeah. I don't know. Would you have a 3 hour?
I don't know. My first, well, I wasn't too sure on the intensity of it. Like, I guess what route he was talking about. My first instinct was hell no. That would probably be super weird. But I don't know. I guess if it was like one of those extended, tincture experiences, I felt it to be really nice. I felt that time actually was super distorted in a different way that I never really experienced before. Like I thought, I was in this thing for like, 4 hours and it was only like 30 minutes. Like I looked at the clock and I was like, what the hell just happened? Right. So I wonder like how potent it is. Yeah. Semi-synthetic 2-methyloxymethyl salvinorin B is more potent in the last 3 hours. And then you just said volunteers.
God.
Yeah. But yeah, salvia, it's such an interesting plant. And I'm just glad to be able to have more conversations about it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like a lot of people are chatting about it. And, it's still ironically legal in a lot of states. It's on a state level, some of them, are illegal. But I think federally it's still not scheduled, right?
Yeah, federally it's legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just statewide.
And some states, they made it illegal. Other states like California, you have to be above 18 to buy it. But yeah, so it's good that it's legal in some places, but then it's also a double-edged sword, because then young kids are going out and buying it and just smoking too much. And it's frustrating when I see YouTube videos of people doing it in like party atmospheres and stuff like that. And I'm like,
do you hear that this is happening still? Like,
I think everyone's been adequately scared off,
that's my assumption too.
Yeah. So, yeah. Although I did see like on the Salvia, there's like a Salvia subreddit that recently someone was writing that like their friend tricked them into smoking Salvia, and that's an asshole move,
Yeah, not cool.
Yeah, not cool at all. So things like that annoy me. So especially because this plant is so genuinely, spiritually, shamanically powerful that it really deserves a lot of respect. And again, the plant is aware of the respect that you bring to it.
Yeah.
And also one kind of has to work with salvia over time as well. As one continues to revisit it, it unfolds. Kind of like getting to know anyone,
Right. Like always renegotiating relationships and trying to figure that out over time.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but it's very comforting to know that there is this plant out there that has love and empathy and understanding and support for us. And we can go to it when we're feeling like we need to. That's another nice thing about it as well is like with mushrooms or LSD, sometimes you kind of have to be in a good setting. You have to be in a good mood before you take it. There's many times where it's just like, I don't think I'm in the mood to take LSD or mushrooms right now, because things are happening in life.
Right.
But with salvia, you can be grumpy as hell, or you can be in like a space of like deep grief,
Mm.
And it's excellent for helping process emotions.
Mm.
So it's really there for us in our times of need.
Mm. Yeah, I kind of noticed that in the past few times where it was like, just still kind of testing the waters out, but noticing, I guess, how gentle it felt on my body, and there
Mhm.
was like a moment of intensity, but also
Mhm.
just how it weared off quickly, and I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm like back to baseline, and that little afterglow,
Right.
where some of the other stuff, it's like, all right, I got to really prep for a lot of this.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right.
Make sure the whole weekend's off or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
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 Awesome, Christopher. Well, is there anything that you want to close with? Anything that's still in your mind?
Well, your listeners can check out my website.
Awesome.
Yes, salviahealings.com. And also shoot me an email. I like communicating with people. I'm not someone sitting in the high tower, not talking to people. I like actually getting engaged with people and having dialogues and helping teach them and work with them. So my information is, you can email me, Christopher@salviahealings.com. There's my website, Salvia Healings. I like writing articles, and I'm a real person that would like to help.
Awesome. Well, this has been great, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Christopher Solomon. Again, if you want to check out his website and his work, you can go on over to salviahealings.com and check out what he's up to. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. I had a really great time talking to Christopher and just learning more about his work and Salvia. Yeah, Salvia seems to have a really weird reputation, I guess, within the psychedelic world, just because of its uniqueness and just the bizarre type of experiences people have had with it. And just even thinking about that YouTube era when people were really filming a lot of these experiences and putting them up. And it looked pretty crazy and pretty weird. Just thinking back to my early years, and I definitely had some really strange experiences with the extract. But, it's really interesting to talk to Christopher and hear about maybe these different approaches with the oral tincture and, just these low doses with the pipe that he created. So, just, really trying to, I guess, approach this with a little bit more intention instead of, doing it for YouTube fame, as it seemed like where it's got its reputation from. It feels like a very powerful healing plan, and deserves much, much respect. So, if you want to support us, you can like us on all of our social medias, follow us over there, subscribe to our podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, iTunes, on Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you're really listening to your podcasts. And if you want to leave a small monthly donation to help us out over here, you can go on over to patreon.com/psychedelics today and help us out financially. And I think the best way to really support us is just share our content, get it out there, tell people you're listening to it, share a piece of content from our social media, and just help to really amplify what we're doing and spread the good word. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to email us, psychedelicstodayemail@gmail.com. And just on a personal note, sorry, if you've emailed us in the past, we haven't responded. We've been getting our systems up, and recently just found out that a bunch of emails were going to an email address, I guess our newsletter email address, and we didn't really know that was happening. So we're trying to play catch up, and hopefully if you didn't hear from us, you'll hear from us as we start to go through that and fix that up. So thanks everybody for the support, and we will catch you on the next episode of Psychedelics Today. Kyle Buller signing off. Take care. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe.